At 4:12 in the morning, on the coldest night Nashville had seen in 7 years, a man named Caleb Walker curled beneath the stone steps of Grace Harbor Church with a torn army jacket pulled over his face. He had not slept in a real bed for 8 months. He had not spoken to his daughter in almost 2 years. And the last prayer he remembered saying had not sounded like faith at all. It had sounded like anger. "God, if you're real," he had whispered behind a dumpster 3 nights earlier, "then you sure forgot where I am." A gust of winter wind slipped under the church awning and cut through the cardboard beneath his ribs. Caleb turned onto his side, trying to keep his knees tucked to his chest. His left shoulder throbbed where an old injury from Afghanistan still burned when the temperature dropped. His right hand trembled, not from the cold alone, but from the battle he was losing with a bottle he had sworn 100 times he would never touch again. In his pocket was a folded photograph, soft at the edges from years of being opened and closed. A little girl in yellow rain boots, his daughter Emily. She had been 7 when the picture was taken. She was 16 now. Caleb had missed birthdays, Christmas mornings, school plays, and the day she got her driver's permit. He had missed the slow changing of her voice, the awkward growing years, the quiet moments that made a father a father. He told himself she was better off without him, but every night, when the city grew still and the memories grew loud, he would pull out that photograph and stare at the smile that used to run toward him when he came home. That night, lying outside the church, Caleb did not know that the side door behind him had a broken latch. He did not know that inside the church kitchen, a woman named Ruth Palmer had arrived early to bake biscuits for a funeral luncheon. And he did not know that before the sun came up, his life would begin to change because of a door that should have been locked. At 4:37, Caleb woke to the sound of footsteps. He froze. On the street, footsteps could mean trouble. They could mean police, teenagers looking for someone to bother, another desperate man guarding a territory that did not belong to anyone. Caleb had learned to wake without moving. His army training had never left him. Some things refused to retire. The footsteps stopped. A woman's voice came from above him. "Sir?" Caleb kept his eyes closed. "Sir, are you alive?" He opened one eye. The woman standing over him looked to be in her late 60s, bundled in a grey coat and a blue scarf. She held a paper grocery bag against one hip. Her hair was silver and tucked beneath a knit hat, and her eyes had the kind of kindness that made Caleb suspicious. "I'm not causing trouble," he muttered. "I didn't ask if you were causing trouble," she said softly. "I asked if you were alive." He sat up slowly, pain flashing through his back. "Alive enough." The woman glanced at the church door, then back at him. "It's 22 degrees. I noticed. You'll freeze out here. I've slept in worse." She looked at him for a long moment, not pitying him, not studying him like a problem, just seeing him. That made Caleb more uncomfortable than the cold. "I'm Ruth," she said. He did not answer. "And you are?" "Nobody." Ruth nodded as though he had given her a perfectly reasonable name. "Well, nobody. I'm going inside to make coffee. There's a fellowship hall with a heater. You can come in for 30 minutes and warm your hands." Caleb shook his head. "I don't do churches." "That's all right," Ruth said. "The heater does." He looked away. Churches made him nervous. Not because he hated God, though sometimes he said he did. Churches reminded him of what he had lost. His mother had taken him to a white-clapboard church in Kentucky when he was a boy. He still remembered her singing hymns with her eyes closed, one hand lifted, like she could see heaven through the ceiling. She had died while he was deployed the second time. He had not made it home for the funeral. After that, faith became a language he could understand, but no longer speak. Ruth shifted the grocery bag in her arms. "I won't preach at you." People always say that before they preach. "Then I won't say much at all." Caleb laughed once, bitter and tired. "Mom, I smell bad. I'm dirty. I'm probably not the kind of man you want in your church kitchen." Ruth's face changed then. Something firm entered her eyes. "My husband came home from Vietnam with nightmares he couldn't explain. Some Sundays he sat in the parking lot and never came through the door. The church didn't belong to the clean people then, and it doesn't now." Caleb looked at her. Vietnam. The word made something in him loosen. Ruth took one step toward the side door and pushed it open. Warm air rolled out, carrying the smell of old wood, coffee grounds, and biscuits beginning to rise. Caleb had refused shelters before. He had refused rides, meals, and phone numbers. Pride was sometimes the last blanket a man had. But that morning, the cold had reached his bones. And there was something about the way Ruth had said her husband sat in the parking lot. So Caleb stood. His legs shook beneath him. He grabbed the rail and pulled himself up, pretending he was steadier than he was. Ruth noticed, but she did not reach for him. Somehow she knew that would embarrass him. Inside, the fellowship hall was dim, lit only by the kitchen fluorescents and a small lamp near the coffee station. Folding chairs leaned against round tables. A bulletin board displayed children's drawings of Noah's Ark, Jonah's whale, and a cross made of tiny handprints. Caleb stopped at the doorway. The warmth hit him first, then the smell of biscuits, then the quiet. He had forgotten quiet could feel safe. Ruth pointed toward a chair near the wall. Sit anywhere. Caleb chose the chair closest to the exit. He always did. Ruth moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. She washed her hands, opened the oven, pulled out a tray, then set a mug of coffee on the table in front of him. She added sugar packets and a small cup of creamer beside it. I don't know how you take it, she said. Black is fine. Black is what people say when they don't want to be trouble. He did not respond. She placed a biscuit on a paper plate and set it near the coffee. No sermon. Caleb stared at the food. He had not eaten since noon the day before, when a man outside a gas station handed him half a chicken sandwich. Hunger clawed at him, but he waited until Ruth turned away before taking a bite. The biscuit was warm, buttery, soft in the middle. He had not expected food to make his eyes burn. Ruth pretended not to notice. For almost 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. Caleb ate slowly, as though someone might change their mind and take it away. Ruth wiped counters and placed more biscuits in a basket lined with a white towel. Then Caleb saw the funeral program stacked beside the sink. A young man's face smiled from the cover. He was wearing a marine dress uniform. Caleb stopped chewing. Ruth followed his gaze. His name was Daniel Mercer, she said quietly. 29 years old. Served 2 tours. His mother is a member here. Caleb looked down at his hands. How'd he die? Ruth's movements slowed. He came home, she said, but some part of him didn't. Caleb understood. He set the biscuit down. The room felt smaller. Ruth did not ask if he had served. She did not have to. Some men carried war in the way they sat, the way they scanned corners, the way they held a mug like they were afraid their own hands might betray them. After a while, she said, the service is at 10. The family asked for biscuits and coffee afterward. That's why I'm here. Caleb pushed back from the table. I should go before people come. Ruth looked at the clock. It's not even 5. Still, he stood too fast. Dizziness swept through him. The room tilted. He gripped the chair. Ruth took 1 step forward. Caleb? He froze. He had not told her his name. She held up both hands. Your jacket. He looked down. His last name was still faintly stitched on the chest. Walker, but not Caleb. She had guessed. No, not guessed. A cold line moved through him. How do you know my first name? Ruth hesitated. At that moment, Caleb had no idea that the answer would open a wound he had spent years trying to bury. Ruth reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I volunteer at the community meal downtown on Thursdays, she said. A woman came there last week looking for someone. She showed us a picture. Older picture, but still. Caleb's throat tightened. No. Ruth unfolded the paper. It was a printed photograph. Not the old picture of Emily in rain boots. A newer one. A teenage girl with brown hair, serious eyes, and a guarded expression stood beside a woman Caleb recognized instantly. His ex-wife, Hannah. Caleb backed away from the table. Ruth's voice remained gentle. She said your daughter wanted to know if you were alive. The words struck him harder than any winter wind. Wanted to know if you were alive, not missed you, not needed you, not loved you, just alive. Caleb swallowed, but his mouth was dry. You need to throw that away. I told her I would keep an eye out. You shouldn't have. She looked worried. She should forget me. Ruth folded the paper again. That doesn't sound like your decision to make. His face hardened. You don't know what I've done. No, Ruth said, I don't. I left, I drank, I scared people, I broke promises. I missed everything. His voice rose and he hated the weakness in it. So don't stand there in a church kitchen and talk like a cup of coffee fixes a man. I wasn't going to. He grabbed his backpack from the floor. Ruth did not stop him, but as he reached the door, she said, Your daughter came looking. Caleb's hand tightened around the strap. She may be angry, Ruth said. She may not know what she wants, but she came looking. He kept his back to her. For one unbearable second, he saw Emily at 7 years old, standing on the porch in yellow rain boots, asking him if heroes ever got scared. He had laughed then and told her, only the brave ones. Now he could not even turn around. Caleb pushed through the side door and stepped into the dark. The cold slapped him awake. Behind him, the church door clicked shut. By sunrise, the city had begun to stir. Cars hissed along the wet streets. Office lights blinked on. A bus groaned at the curb, its brakes sighing like an old man. Caleb walked without knowing where he was going. His boots were cracked. His socks were damp. His shoulder ached. But none of it reached him. Ruth's words followed him down every block. Your daughter came looking. He tried to bury the thought beneath familiar anger. Where was she when he lost the apartment? Where was Hannah when he woke up shaking and sweating, unable to remember if he was in Tennessee or Kandahar? Where was God when the convoy hit the roadside bomb? Where was anyone when his best friend Marcus died with his hand in Caleb's, whispering a prayer Caleb could not finish? But the anger would not hold. Underneath it was shame. Shame had been Caleb's companion for years. It slept beside him under bridges. It rode with him on buses. It followed him into job interviews and made him leave before anyone could reject him. It whispered that he was too broken to be a father, too dirty to be forgiven, too far gone to be found. By 8 o'clock, Caleb was standing outside a liquor store that had not opened yet. He had $12 in his pocket. The owner knew him by sight and sometimes let him stand inside near the heater if he bought something cheap. Caleb told himself he only wanted warmth. He told himself the bottle would help him sleep. He told himself a lot of things. Across the street, a mother walked with a little girl in a purple coat. The girl jumped over cracks in the sidewalk, holding her mother's hand. Caleb turned away. The liquor store sign flickered on. Open. He crossed the street. His hand was on the door when his phone buzzed. Caleb almost dropped it. The phone was old, prepaid, and usually dead. He had charged it the day before at the library. Only 3 people had the number: a veteran outreach worker, a man named T-Bone who slept near the river, and Hannah, though she had not used it in years. The screen showed an unknown number. He stared until it stopped ringing. Then it buzzed again. He let it ring. The 3rd time he answered. For a moment, there was only breathing. Then a girl's voice said, Dad? The street seemed to fall silent. Caleb closed his eyes. Emily, he could not speak. Dad, she said again, smaller this time. He swallowed hard. Yeah. A sharp breath came through the phone, like she had not expected him to answer. It's me. I know. Silence. He could hear traffic on her end. Or maybe it was his. I went looking for you, she said. Caleb looked at the liquor store door, his reflection dim in the glass. Beard tangled, eyes hollow, jacket stained, a ghost wearing his old name. You shouldn't have done that, he said. I wanted to know. I'm alive. I can hear that. Another silence, so much lived inside it. Years of missing, years of questions, years of a daughter learning not to wait by windows. Emily's voice trembled, but she fought it. Mom didn't want me to call. She's right. No, she's not. Caleb pressed his hand against the brick wall. Emily, are you drinking again? The question came clean and direct. He looked at the liquor store sign. No, he lied. The lie tasted worse than whiskey. Emily did not answer. She knew. Of course she knew. When she was little, she used to find his hidden bottles before Hannah did. Once she had poured one down the sink and asked him why grown-ups drank things that made them mean. He had promised her that day he would stop. That promise had lasted 36 hours. Dad, she said, I'm singing at church this Sunday. Caleb opened his eyes. What? At the youth service. It's not a big deal. It was a big deal. He could hear it in the way she pretended it was not. I wanted... Her voice faded, then came back stronger. I wanted to invite you. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm stupid. You're not stupid. Then why am I doing this? He had no answer. She sniffed once, angry at herself for crying. It's at Grace Harbor, 11 o'clock, Sunday. I don't care if you come. I just thought you should know. The line went dead. Caleb stood outside the liquor store with the phone in his hand. Grace Harbor, the same church, the one where Ruth had found him, the one whose steps had kept him off the frozen pavement. He looked up at the grey morning sky. For a second, something like fear moved through him. Not fear of war, not fear of cold, fear that God had not forgotten where he was after all. Then the liquor store door opened, and the owner called out, "You coming in or not?" Caleb looked at the door. He thought of Emily's voice. He thought of the funeral program with the young Marine's face. He thought of Ruth saying, "The church didn't belong to the clean people then, and it doesn't now." His hand trembled. He stepped back. Then another tremor came, deep in his chest, and he hated it. He hated feeling pulled toward hope because hope had hurt him worse than despair. Despair asked nothing of him. Hope asked him to stand up. Caleb shoved the phone into his pocket and walked away. He made it 6 blocks before he bought a bottle from another store. By noon, it was empty. By evening, he could not remember where he had left his backpack. And by midnight, he was crying behind a closed laundromat, holding Emily's photograph in both hands, whispering, "I'm sorry," to a daughter who could not hear him. The next morning, Caleb woke in an alley with rain dripping from a fire escape onto his forehead. His mouth tasted like rust. His head pounded. His left shoe was gone. For several minutes, he could not remember what day it was. Then he remembered the call. Sunday. Emily singing. Grace Harbor. He sat up too fast and vomited beside a trash can. A man passing by muttered something and crossed the street. Caleb leaned back against the brick wall and laughed. It was not a happy sound. "There," he said to no one, "that's your miracle." A man sleeping under cardboard nearby stirred. It was T-Bone, whose real name was Terrell Baker, though hardly anyone used it. He had been on the streets longer than Caleb and knew every soup kitchen schedule in 3 counties. "You talking to God again?" T-Bone mumbled. "Not exactly." "Careful. He talks back sometimes." Caleb wiped his mouth with his sleeve. "When did you become a preacher?" "When I got too old to run from truth." T-Bone opened one eye. "You look rough, soldier." "Lost my shoe." "That ain't your biggest problem." Caleb looked at him. T-Bone sat up, wrapped in a faded Titan's blanket. "You kept saying a name last night." Caleb's stomach turned. "What name?" "Emily." Caleb looked away. "Daughter?" T-Bone asked. He nodded once. "She still talking to you?" "She called." T-Bone let out a low whistle. "That's Grace knocking." "Grace doesn't knock in alleys." "Sure it does. Sometimes it has to come where you live." Caleb closed his eyes. "I messed it up." "You breathing?" "Unfortunately." "Then it ain't fully messed up." Caleb wanted to argue, but he was too tired. T-Bone reached into his bag and pulled out a worn sneaker. "Try this." Caleb stared. "Where'd you get that?" "Donation bin. Been saving it." "For what?" T-Bone shrugged. "Didn't know yet." The sneaker was a little too big, but it stayed on. Caleb sat in silence, overwhelmed by the absurd holiness of an old shoe given in an alley. T-Bone watched him lace it. "You going to see that girl?" "No." "Why not?" "Because look at me." "I am." "Then you know why." T-Bone leaned forward. His eyes were cloudy, but his voice sharpened. "Listen to me, Walker. Shame will tell you that staying away is love. It ain't. Sometimes love is showing up ugly and telling the truth." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I don't know how." "You start with one step." "I'll hurt her." "You already did. Now decide whether that's the end of the story." The words landed with uncomfortable weight. At that moment, Caleb had no idea that T-Bone had once been a father too. He did not know about the son who stopped answering calls, or the apology letter Terrell carried in a plastic bag, unread and unsent. Everyone on the streets had a story. Most were buried under survival. Caleb stood, unsteady. "Where you going?" T-Bone asked. "To find my backpack." "And then?" Caleb looked toward the distant church steeple, just visible between buildings. I don't know. That's better than no. The backpack was gone. So were Caleb's extra socks, his small blanket, a paperback New Testament his mother had given him before he enlisted, and the photograph of Emily in the rain boots. He tore through the alley, checked behind dumpsters, asked two men near the bus station, and retraced every place he remembered being the night before. Nothing. By late afternoon, he stood beneath an overpass, shaking with rage. The photograph was all he had left. Not the phone, not the jacket, not the medals he had pawned years earlier. That small picture had been his proof that he had once belonged to someone. He slammed his fist against a concrete pillar. Pain shot through his hand. God, he shouted. His voice echoed under the bridge. A car horn answered from the road above. Is this funny to you? Caleb yelled. You take everything? You take Marcus? You take my mom, my home, my kid? And now that? He struck the pillar again. His knuckles split. Where were you? The question tore out of him before he could stop it. Where were you when I held him? Where were you when he was bleeding out and asking me to pray? Where were you when I couldn't remember the words? He sank to the ground. The memory came full force. Afghanistan, 2010, dust thick as smoke, the ringing after the blast, Marcus lying half beneath the overturned door of the Humvee, eyes wide, blood dark against the sand. Caleb had crawled to him, dragging one useless arm, trying to call for a medic, trying to stop blood with hands that would not obey. Marcus, 23 years old, newly married, always singing gospel songs off-key, had grabbed Caleb's sleeve and whispered, "Pray with me." Caleb had opened his mouth. Nothing came. The Lord's Prayer, Psalm 23, his mother's bedtime prayers, all of it vanished. He could remember radio codes. He could remember coordinates. He could remember how to clear a jammed rifle. But he could not remember how to speak to God while his friend died. Marcus had smiled anyway. Jesus knows, he whispered. Then he was gone. Caleb came home with a medal, a scar, and a silence inside him that no one could enter. Hannah tried at first. She held him when he woke screaming. She drove him to appointments. She begged him to talk. But Caleb became a locked house. Then he became a dangerous one. He never hit her or Emily, but he broke doors, shouted at shadows, disappeared for days, and drank until he could not feel the war crawling under his skin. The day Hannah finally told him to leave, Emily had stood at the top of the stairs in her pajamas. She did not cry. That was worse. She just watched him carry a duffel bag to the door and asked, "Daddy, are you coming back when you get better?" He had said yes. Then he did not get better. Under the overpass, Caleb pressed his bleeding hand against his chest and rocked like a child. The photograph was gone. His daughter had invited him to church, and he had spent the night drunk in an alley. He whispered, "I can't do this." The wind moved through the concrete pillars. For a moment he thought he heard his mother's voice. Not with his ears, somewhere deeper. "Baby, you don't have to do it alone." He looked up sharply. No one was there. Only traffic. Only rain. Only the city. But something had shifted. It was small. Almost nothing. A crack in the wall. Saturday passed like a fever. Caleb found a shelter bed but could not sleep. He ate soup but could not taste it. He washed his face in a restroom and stared at himself in the mirror for so long that another man asked if he was all right. Was he? He did not know. He had spent years measuring life by what he had lost. Now one question kept pressing against his chest. What if there was still something left to lose? By Sunday morning, the rain had stopped. The sky was pale and clean. Sunlight touched the wet pavement and made the whole city look newly forgiven. Caleb stood outside Grace Harbor Church at 10:43. He had found a clean shirt from a donation box. It was too tight around the shoulders and missing one button. His beard was trimmed unevenly with a disposable razor. He smelled faintly of soap, damp wool, and fear. Families walked past him toward the front doors. Mothers adjusted children's collars. Men carried Bibles. Teenagers laughed in small groups. A little boy in cowboy boots ran ahead until his father caught him by the hand. Caleb stayed across the street. He could see the church sign. Youth Worship Service 11 Shao. AM. All are welcome, all are welcome. He almost laughed. Then he saw Ruth near the entrance. She was greeting people with a bulletin in one hand and a hug ready in the other. She looked across the street and spotted him. Caleb stepped back. Ruth did not wave him over, she simply saw him, then turned slightly and opened the front door wider. That was all. No pressure. Just an open door. Caleb crossed halfway, then stopped at the median. A car passed, then another. His heart pounded as if he were walking into gunfire. He thought of Emily at 7. He thought of Emily at 16. He thought of T-Bone saying, "Shame will tell you that staying away is love." He took one step, then another. By the time he reached the sidewalk, his hands were trembling. Ruth met him at the bottom step. "You came," she said. "I might leave." "That's allowed." "I might not make it through." "Then sit near the back." "I don't belong here." Ruth's eyes softened. "Caleb, none of us came in here because we belonged. We came because we were invited." He looked past her into the sanctuary. Warm light fell through stained glass. A wooden cross hung above the platform. The air smelled of coffee, perfume, old hymnals, and floor polish. Somewhere inside, a piano began to play. Caleb whispered, "She's going to hate me." Ruth did not deny it. "She might be angry," she said. "She might be hurt. But you didn't come because this will be easy. You came because love is worth telling the truth." He nodded, though he was not sure he believed it. Ruth handed him a bulletin. He entered the church. Every step down the aisle felt too loud. He chose the last pew, far left, near the side exit. A few people glanced back. One man smiled politely. A woman with a toddler gave him a kind nod. Nobody asked him to leave. That almost broke him. The service began with music. Teenagers stood on the platform with microphones and guitars. Caleb kept his head down. Then the youth pastor, a young man with nervous energy and kind eyes, welcomed everyone and said, "This morning, one of our students asked to share a song that means a lot to her family. Emily Carter, come on up." Carter, not Walker. Of course, she used Hannah's last name now. Caleb gripped the pew. Emily walked onto the platform. For a moment, he could not breathe. She was taller than he expected. Her brown hair fell over one shoulder. She wore a simple blue dress and white cardigan. She looked like Hannah around the eyes, but the way she held her chin was all Caleb. Brave and afraid at the same time. She stepped to the microphone and looked out at the room. Her gaze moved across the front rows, then the middle, then the back. She saw him. The color drained from her face. The pianist kept playing softly. Emily's mouth opened, but no sound came. Caleb stood halfway, ready to leave, ready to spare her the embarrassment of having him there, but Emily lifted one hand slightly. Not a wave, not welcome, not forgiveness, just stop. So he sat down. Emily closed her eyes. When she began to sing, her voice shook on the first line, then steadied. It was an old hymn Caleb's mother used to sing while washing dishes. The same hymn Marcus used to hum off key in the barracks. The same hymn Caleb had not allowed himself to hear in years. Amazing Grace. The words entered him like light through a boarded window. He tried to hold himself together. He failed. Tears spilled down his face silently. He covered his mouth with his injured hand, the bandage already stained. Emily kept singing, but halfway through the second verse, her voice cracked. She opened her eyes and looked at him, and all the hurt between them filled the sanctuary. The years, the broken promises, the birthdays without calls, the empty chair, the father who had come home from war but never really come home to her. Caleb wanted to stand and tell everyone he was sorry. He wanted to run. He wanted to disappear beneath the floorboards. Then Emily stopped singing. The piano faltered. The room went still. Emily stared at her father from the platform, tears shining on her face. And then, in front of the entire church, she stepped away from the microphone and walked down the aisle toward him. Caleb could not move. Every eye turned. Ruth stood near the back, one hand pressed to her chest. Emily stopped at the end of his pew. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Caleb's voice broke. "I'm sorry." Emily looked at him like the words were both everything and not enough. Then she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out something small, worn and familiar. A photograph, a little girl in yellow rain boots. Caleb stared at it, unable to understand. I found it, she said, her voice trembling. Someone brought your backpack to the church this morning. His knees weakened. Emily held the photograph between them. I thought you threw it away, she whispered. Caleb shook his head, tears falling harder. I looked at it every night. Her face crumpled. For 1 second, Caleb saw the little girl beneath the young woman, the child who had waited, the daughter who had wanted a father and gotten a ghost. He reached for her, then stopped himself. Emily looked at his outstretched hand. The entire church seemed to hold its breath. Then the old side door near the fellowship hall slammed open. A man's voice shouted from the hallway, "Somebody call 911." Everyone turned. Ruth ran toward the sound. Caleb rose from the pew. The voice shouted again, panicked and breathless. "There's a man collapsed outside. He's not breathing right." Caleb moved before he understood why. Instinct took over. He pushed past the end of the pew and followed Ruth through the side hallway, Emily right behind him. They burst through the door into the cold morning light. On the church steps, beneath the same awning where Caleb had slept 2 nights earlier, lay T-Bone. His Titan's blanket was wrapped around his shoulders. His face was grey, his eyes were half open, and clutched in his hand was Caleb's missing backpack. Caleb dropped to his knees. T-Bone. Terrell's lips moved, but no sound came. Ruth knelt beside him and began praying under her breath. Someone called for an ambulance. The church crowd gathered at a distance, frightened and silent. Caleb took T-Bone's hand. It was cold. Too cold. "No," Caleb whispered. "No, no, no. Stay with me." T-Bone's cloudy eyes shifted toward him. With tremendous effort, he pressed the backpack closer. Inside the open zipper, Caleb saw his mother's old New Testament, damp but still there. T-Bone had found it. He had brought it back. Caleb leaned over him, shaking. "Why did you come here? Why didn't you go to the hospital?" T-Bone's mouth formed the faintest smile. "Had to," he breathed. "Get you home." Caleb began to sob. Emily stood behind him, one hand over her mouth. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance. T-Bone's fingers tightened once around Caleb's hand. Then his eyes rolled back. Caleb looked up at the church doors, at the cross above them, at the daughter standing behind him, at Ruth praying in the cold, at the backpack filled with the last pieces of his life. And for the first time in years, Caleb prayed with no anger left. "God," he whispered, his voice breaking open, "please don't take him too." The sirens grew louder. Emily reached down and placed her hand on her father's shoulder. Caleb closed his eyes, and everything he had been running from finally caught him. The paramedics rushed up the church steps, while Caleb stayed on his knees with T-Bone's hand in his own. "Sir, we need room," one of them said. Caleb did not move until Ruth touched his shoulder. "Caleb," she whispered, "let them help him." He released T-Bone's hand slowly, like letting go might make him disappear. The paramedics worked fast, speaking in short, urgent phrases. One checked his breathing, another opened a medical bag. Someone brought a blanket from inside the church and spread it near them. The whole congregation stood back in stunned silence, dressed in Sunday clothes beneath the winter sky. Emily stood beside Caleb, her hand still on his shoulder. He could feel how lightly she touched him, as if part of her still wanted to pull away. But she did not. That small mercy nearly undid him. The ambulance doors opened. T-Bone was lifted onto a stretcher, his Titan's blanket tucked around him. His hand hung off the side, fingers curled as if still holding the backpack he had carried through the city. Caleb stepped forward. "Can I go with him?" The paramedic looked at him. "Are you family?" Caleb froze. Family. The word had become complicated. He had a daughter who barely knew him, an ex-wife who had every reason to keep distance, and a friend from the streets who had just risked his life to return a backpack. "He's my friend," Caleb said. The paramedic hesitated. Ruth stepped up. "He's the closest thing that man has right now." That was enough. The paramedic nodded. "One rider." Caleb turned back. Emily stood on the church steps, pale and shaken, still holding the photograph of herself in the yellow rain boots. He wanted to say something that could explain everything at once. He wanted to tell her that he was sorry for the song, sorry for the years, sorry for smelling like the streets, sorry for making her see him fall apart in front of strangers. But the words crowded his throat and jammed there. Emily spoke first. Go. Caleb stared at her. He brought your bag back, she said, voice trembling. Go with him. He nodded. Then he climbed into the ambulance. As the doors closed, he saw Emily standing beside Ruth, the photograph pressed against her chest. The siren came alive. The ambulance pulled away from Grace Harbor Church, and Caleb sat strapped to a narrow bench while a paramedic monitored T-Bone's breathing. Machines beeped. Plastic tubes shifted. The smell of antiseptic filled the small space. Caleb stared at T-Bone's face. Don't you do this, he whispered. You hear me? You don't get to drag me to church and then leave. T-Bone did not answer. The paramedic looked up. You know if he has any medical history? Caleb shook his head. He doesn't talk about it. Medications? I don't know. Any family? Caleb swallowed. He had a son. Name? I don't know. He felt useless. For months he had slept near T-Bone, shared food with him, borrowed jokes from him, listened to him talk about God in alleys like the Lord still walked through places respectable people avoided. And Caleb did not even know his son's name. He lowered his head. The ambulance bounced over a pothole. T-Bone's hand shifted. Something slipped from the pocket of his old coat and fell near Caleb's boot. A plastic bag. Inside it was an envelope, folded and refolded until the edges were soft. Caleb picked it up. On the front, written in shaky blue ink, were the words, "For my son, Isaiah." Caleb's chest tightened. He looked at T-Bone's still face. You've been carrying this, he whispered. The paramedic glanced over but said nothing. Caleb held the envelope like it was something holy. All that time, T-Bone had been telling him to show up, to tell the truth, to stop letting shame pretend to be love. And he had been carrying his own unfinished apology. At the hospital, the emergency room swallowed them in noise. Nurses moved with practiced urgency. T-Bone was taken through double doors, and Caleb was left standing in a hallway with the backpack over one shoulder and the envelope in his hand. For several minutes, he did not know what to do. He hated hospitals. The lights were too bright. The beeping machines sounded too much like monitors in military clinics. The smell pulled him backward through time to field hospitals, stitches, morphine, men trying not to scream. He backed toward the exit. Then he saw his reflection in a glass panel, unshaven, afraid, ready to run. He closed his eyes. No, not this time. He walked to the nurse's desk. The man they brought in, Terrell Baker, they call him T-Bone. I came with him. The nurse typed something. Are you related? No, but I'm staying. All right, have a seat. We'll update you when we can. The waiting room was crowded. A child cried into her mother's lap. An old man slept under a jacket. A woman in scrubs drank coffee with both hands. Caleb chose a chair in the corner where he could see every entrance. The backpack sat between his boots. His mother's New Testament was inside. Emily's photograph was safe in his jacket pocket now. Before the ambulance left, Ruth had stepped forward and pressed it into his hand, saying, "She wanted you to have it." Caleb had not trusted himself to answer. He took the photograph out now. Yellow rain boots, wide smile, small hands lifted as if she had just jumped into a puddle. He remembered that day clearly. Rain had poured all afternoon, and Hannah had wanted Emily to stay inside. But Caleb had come home early from base, still in uniform, and Emily begged him to play outside. He had changed clothes, taken her hand, and spent 20 minutes splashing through the driveway while Hannah laughed from the porch. That was before the last deployment, before Marcus, before silence became a wall. He pressed the photograph to his forehead. Lord, he whispered, and the word felt strange in his mouth. I don't even know how to come back. No thunder answered, no angel appeared. Only the hospital waiting room, the crying child, the smell of burnt coffee. But then his phone buzzed. Emily. Not a call. A text. Is he alive? Caleb stared at the screen for a long moment, surprised she had written. He typed slowly. Yes. Doctors have him now. 3 dots appeared. Vanished. Appeared again. Are you staying? He looked toward the emergency doors. Yes. This time there was a longer pause. Then Emily replied, Good, 1 word. But Caleb read it 10 times. Good. It was not forgiveness. It was not trust. It was a door cracked open the width of a finger. He would not force it wider. An hour passed, then two. Ruth arrived around 1 o'clock, carrying a paper bag of sandwiches, 2 bottles of water, and the calm authority of a woman who had survived more storms than she announced. Emily was with her. Caleb stood when he saw them. Emily stopped a few feet away. Her eyes were red, but her face was composed in that careful way teenagers wear when they refuse to fall apart. "I thought you went home," Caleb said. "I did," she answered. "Then I came back." Ruth handed Caleb a sandwich. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." She gave him the look. He took the sandwich. The three of them sat in the corner of the waiting room, leaving one chair between Caleb and Emily. That empty chair felt like the last 2 years made visible. For a while they ate in silence. Caleb took small bites, though his stomach twisted. Ruth watched the doors. Emily stared at her hands. Finally, Emily said, "Was he your friend?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah." "What's his real name?" "Terrell Baker." "Why does everyone call him T-Bone?" Caleb almost smiled. He said it was because he once ate 3 steaks at a church picnic and then fell asleep behind the pulpit. Emily's mouth twitched despite herself. The small, almost smile disappeared quickly, but Caleb saw it. He stored it carefully, like a candle cupped against wind. "He found your backpack," she said. "Looks like it." "He came to the church." "Yeah." "Why?" Caleb looked down at the sandwich wrapped in white paper. "He told me once that Grace knocks where you live. Maybe he decided to do the knocking himself." Emily turned that over in her mind. Then she said, "I hated you." Caleb went still. Ruth lowered her eyes, giving the words room. Emily kept looking at her hands. "I used to pray you'd come home. Then I prayed you'd call. Then I prayed you'd get better. Then I stopped praying for you because it hurt too much when nothing changed." Caleb's throat burned. "I understand." "No, you don't." He nodded once. "You're right." That surprised her enough to make her look at him. He forced himself not to look away. "I don't understand what it was like for you," he said. "I only know what I did. And I won't tell you I had reasons like that makes it okay. I was sick, and I was scared, and I was drinking, and I was ashamed. But you were a child. None of that was your burden to carry." Emily's eyes filled. Caleb continued, each word costing him. "I missed things I can't get back. I lied. I disappeared. I made promises and broke them. I made you wonder if you were worth staying for." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You were," he whispered. "You always were. I just became a man who didn't know how to stay." Emily wiped her face quickly. "Mum said I shouldn't expect anything. She's trying to protect you. She says you sound sorry every time you're scared." Caleb looked at Ruth, then back at Emily. "She's not wrong." Emily flinched, like honesty hurt more than excuses. Caleb rested his hands on his knees. His knuckles were bandaged from the overpass. "I can't ask you to trust me because of one Sunday. I don't trust me because of one Sunday, but I'm going to get help." Emily searched his face. "You said that before." "I know. So why is this different?" There it was. The question no apology could dodge. Caleb looked toward the double doors where T-Bone had disappeared. He thought of the envelope. He thought of Marcus dying in the dust. He thought of his mother's voice, soft and impossible under the overpass. Then he looked back at his daughter. "Because this morning, when Terrell was lying on those steps, I asked God not to take him. And I realized I've spent years blaming God for leaving me while I kept walking away from every hand he sent." Emily's face changed. "I don't know how to fix everything," Caleb said, "but I know I can't keep calling destruction pain and pretending it's the same thing. I need treatment. I need to stop drinking. I need to face what happened over there, and I need to stop making you pay for wounds you didn't cause." Emily cried silently now. Ruth reached into her purse and handed her a tissue. Caleb wanted to hug her. He did not move. At last, Emily whispered, "I don't know if I can forgive you yet." Caleb nodded, tears in his own eyes. "You don't have to today. I don't know if I want you in my life. I understand, but I don't want you dead." His breath caught. She looked at him, young and wounded and brave. "So don't die." It was not dramatic. It was not polished. It was not the kind of line people put on greeting cards. It was a daughter standing at the edge of hope, afraid to step closer, begging her father not to make her regret caring. Caleb bowed his head and wept. Ruth placed one hand on Emily's shoulder and one on Caleb's. No one said anything for a while. A doctor came out at 2:26. Family for Terrell Baker. Caleb stood too quickly. Ruth stood beside him. The doctor looked at the three of them. Mr. Baker is stable for now. He had severe hypothermia, dehydration, and signs of pneumonia. We're starting treatment and keeping him under close observation. Caleb felt his knees weaken. But he's alive, Emily asked. The doctor nodded. He's alive. Caleb covered his face with both hands. Thank you. The words rose in him before he could stop them. Not angry this time, not bargaining, just gratitude. The doctor continued. He's been asking for someone named Walker. Caleb lowered his hands. That's me. You can see him for a few minutes. Caleb turned to Emily. Do you want to come? She hesitated, then she shook her head. Not yet. Ruth said, I'll stay with her. Caleb followed the doctor down the hall. T-Bone lay in a hospital bed, swallowed by white sheets, an oxygen tube beneath his nose. Without his blanket and layers of street armor, he looked smaller, older, more fragile. But his eyes were open. When he saw Caleb, he tried to grin. Soldier, he rasped. Caleb sat beside the bed. You scared me half to death. Only half, T-Bone whispered. Must be losing my touch. Caleb laughed through tears. Then he held up the envelope. This fell out in the ambulance. T-Bone's smile faded. Caleb placed it gently on the bedside table. I didn't open it. T-Bone stared at the envelope for a long time. My boy, he said. Isaiah? T-Bone closed his eyes. Haven't seen him in 11 years. Caleb leaned back, the weight of that number settling between them. What happened? T-Bone breathed carefully, each word thin. Same thing that happens to fools. Pride, pills, jail, lies. Came out saying I was changed, then proved I wasn't. His mama moved him away. He was right to hate me. Caleb looked at him. You don't know that he hates you. I know what I earned. Caleb heard his own voice in those words. He picked up the envelope and turned it in his hands. You told me shame lies. It does. You said staying away isn't love. T-Bone opened one eye. I hate when people quote me. You said grace knocks where you live. That one was good. It was. For a moment they were quiet. Then Caleb said, maybe it's your turn. T-Bone's eyes filled, though he tried to hide it. I don't even know where he is. We'll find him. T-Bone swallowed. We? Caleb nodded. You got me to church. I'll help you send the letter. T-Bone looked away toward the window. Grey afternoon light touched his face. I carried it 6 years, he whispered. Never mailed it. Why? Because once it's sent, he can reject me for real. As long as it stays in my pocket, I can pretend maybe. Caleb understood so deeply it hurt. The bottle, the alley, the missed calls. The way a man could call himself hopeless when really he was terrified that hope might ask for courage. Caleb leaned forward. Terrell, I don't know if Isaiah answers. I don't know if Emily forgives me. I don't know if treatment works the first time or the 10th. But I know this. I am tired of letting fear make all my decisions and then calling it fate. T-Bone turned back to him. Caleb's voice shook. You walked across town sick, cold and half dead to return my backpack. You gave me back my mother's Bible and my daughter's picture. Let somebody help give you back a chance. T-Bone closed his eyes. A tear slipped into his grey beard. Pray for me, Walker. Caleb froze. The room seemed to tilt. Pray. The last time a friend had asked him that, Caleb had been kneeling in Afghan dust, with blood on his hands and no words in his mouth. His chest tightened. I don't know if I can. T-Bone opened his eyes. Jesus knows. Caleb stopped breathing. The same words. Marcus's last words. Jesus knows. For years, Caleb had remembered those words as a wound. Now, in a hospital room in Nashville, they returned as a doorway. He bowed his head. At first, nothing came. His throat closed. His hands trembled. The old panic rose, hot and choking. He saw Marcus's face. He heard the blast. He smelled smoke and blood and sand. Then he felt something else. Emily's hand on his shoulder, Ruth's voice at the church door, T-Bone's sneaker in the alley, his mother singing in the kitchen. Small mercies, one after another, like breadcrumbs laid across the wilderness. Caleb took a breath. "Lord," he whispered, "I don't have pretty words." T-Bone's hand found his. "But you know Terrell. You know his son. You know all the roads that got broken. You know the things we did and the things done to us. Please help him heal. Help him be brave. Help me be brave too." His voice broke. "And Lord, thank you for not giving up when we did." That was all. No long sermon, no perfect prayer. But when Caleb opened his eyes, T-Bone was crying. "So you do remember how?" T-Bone whispered. Caleb wiped his face. "Barely. Barely counts." When Caleb returned to the waiting room, Emily was sitting alone. Ruth had stepped down the hall to make a phone call. Emily looked up. "Is he okay?" "He's stable, talking too much." "That sounds good." "It is." Caleb sat, leaving the empty chair between them again. After a moment, Emily said, "Did you pray with him?" Caleb looked at her, surprised. "How did you know?" "I don't know. You look different." He let that settle. "I did," he said. "You used to pray with me when I was little." His eyes softened. "Before bedtime. You made up stories about angels guarding the windows." "I remember." "I thought you forgot everything." "No." He took the photograph from his pocket. "I forgot how to live with it." "Not the same thing." Emily stared at the photo. "I was so mad when I saw that." "When?" "This morning. A man gave your backpack to Mrs. Ruth before service. She opened it to find out whose it was. The picture fell out. I knew right away." Emily wiped her cheek. "I thought, how dare you keep that? How dare you carry a picture and still not come home?" Caleb flinched. "I don't mean that to be cruel," she said. "It's true. I wanted to rip it up." He nodded, "But then I thought, maybe you didn't forget me." His voice was barely audible. "Never." Emily folded her arms, defensive again against her own tenderness. "That doesn't fix it." "I know." Ruth returned then, holding her phone. She looked at Caleb. "I called Pastor Mark. He knows a veteran recovery program connected with a residential treatment center outside Franklin. They have beds sometimes, but there's an intake process." Caleb's stomach tightened. Residential, treatment. The words sounded like surrender and salvation at the same time. Ruth watched him carefully. "No one can make you go." Emily looked down. Caleb saw it. That guarded lowering of hope before disappointment could reach it. He had seen that look too many times. "How soon?" he asked. Ruth blinked. "Soon as they'll take you." "I'll call." Emily's head lifted. Caleb looked at her. "Not because I think one phone call makes me better, because you told me not to die. And I heard you." Her face crumpled again, but she held herself together. Ruth handed him the phone number written on the back of a church bulletin. His hands shook as he took it. That evening, Caleb made the call from a quiet corner of the hospital chapel. The chapel was small, with 4 rows of chairs, a wooden cross on the wall, and a stained glass window showing a shepherd carrying a lamb. Someone had left a box of tissues on the front chair. Someone else had left a folded note tucked beneath a Bible. Caleb sat in the back row, always near the exit. A man named Peter answered the phone. His voice was steady and direct, the voice of someone who had heard desperate men before and did not frighten easily. Caleb told him the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Army veteran, homeless, alcohol, nightmares, no stable place to go, daughter, church, friend in hospital, afraid he would not last another winter. There was a pause, then Peter said, "Caleb, can you come in tomorrow morning for intake?" Caleb gripped the phone. Tomorrow. That soon. Every excuse lined up inside him. He had no clothes, no ID except an expired veteran card, no transportation, no courage. Then he looked at the cross on the wall. "Yes," he said, "we'll arrange a ride from Grace Harbor Church at 8. Caleb almost laughed. "Of course you will." "Sorry." "Nothing. I'll be there." When he hung up, the chapel was silent. Caleb walked to the front row and picked up the Bible lying there. His mother's New Testament was still in his backpack, but this one was larger, worn, with notes in the margins. He opened it without thinking. His eyes fell on a story he had heard as a boy. A man begging by the road, people telling him to be quiet, Jesus stopping anyway. Caleb did not read far, he could not handle much. But one sentence stayed with him, not as a lecture, but as a hand extended in the dark. "What do you want me to do for you?" Caleb closed the Bible. For years he had wanted God to explain the pain, explain the bomb, explain Marcus, explain his mother's funeral, explain why he came home with all his limbs and still felt missing. But sitting there in the hospital chapel, he realized explanation was not the first thing he needed. He needed mercy. He bowed his head. "Help me want to live," he whispered. The next morning, Caleb stood outside Grace Harbor Church with his backpack, Ruth beside him and Emily across from him on the sidewalk. Hannah sat in a parked car at the curb. She had come because Emily asked her to. Caleb had not seen Hannah in nearly 2 years. She looked older, though still beautiful in the quiet, steady way that had first drawn him to her. Her hair was pulled back. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. She did not get out. He did not blame her. Emily shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "I told Mom you're going," she said. "I figured." She said, "She hopes you mean it." "So do I." Emily nodded. The treatment center van had not arrived yet. Ruth stood a few feet away, pretending to organize donation bags so father and daughter could have a moment. Caleb looked toward Hannah's car, then back at Emily. "Can you tell your mom something for me?" Emily's face guarded itself. "Tell her I'm sorry," Caleb said. "Not the kind where she has to answer, not the kind that asks for anything, just, I know I hurt her too." Emily swallowed. "Okay. And tell her thank you for raising you when I wasn't there." That one reached her. She blinked fast. For a moment, the only sound was traffic moving along the wet street. Then Emily reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. "I wrote this last night," she said. "Don't read it until you get there." Caleb took it with both hands. "All right. It's not a forgiveness letter. I understand. It's not a promise. I know. It's just something." He held it carefully. "Something is more than I deserve." Emily looked at him sharply. "Don't do that." "What? Don't make me feel like I have to comfort you because you hate yourself." The words hit hard. Caleb nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm serious. I know." She took a shaky breath. "Get help because you're worth helping, not just because I asked." Caleb had no defense against that. His eyes filled. "I'm trying to believe that." The van turned the corner, a simple white van with the name of the recovery center on the side. Caleb's pulse jumped. Ruth came over and hugged him, firm and motherly. "One day at a time." He nodded against her shoulder. When she let go, Emily stood still. Caleb did not reach for her. She looked at the van, then at him. Then she stepped forward and hugged him around the middle. For half a second he was too stunned to move. Then he wrapped his arms around her gently, afraid of holding too tight, afraid of letting go too soon. She smelled like shampoo and winter air. His little girl. Not little anymore. But still his daughter. She pulled back quickly, wiping her face with her sleeve. "Don't make this weird," she said. He laughed through tears. "Wouldn't dream of it." The van driver opened the door. Caleb climbed in. Before it pulled away, he looked toward Hannah's car. She was watching him through the windshield. Their eyes met. He mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." Hannah's face did not soften exactly, but after a moment she nodded once. That was enough for the road ahead. The first week of treatment was worse than Caleb expected. Hope made good speeches on church steps, but healing lived in fluorescent rooms, group meetings, trembling hands, and nights when old cravings scratched at the door like animals. He slept in a narrow bed with clean sheets and woke drenched in sweat. He sat in circles with other veterans who carried their own wars behind their eyes. He met counselors who did not flinch when he spoke of nightmares. He met men who had relapsed 6 times and still came back. He met a chaplain named Luis who never rushed him toward easy answers. On the 3rd night, Caleb nearly left. He had packed his backpack and made it to the end of the hallway before Luis found him standing by the exit. "Going somewhere?" Luis asked. Caleb gripped the straps. "I can't breathe in here." Luis nodded. Then breathe out here. I need air. Let's get some. They stepped into a courtyard under a cold sky. The stars were faint above the building lights. Caleb paced like a trapped animal. This place is digging up things I buried for a reason. Luis leaned against the railing. Buried things don't always stay dead. Sometimes they just poison the ground. Caleb stopped. I'm tired, he said. I believe you. I hurt everyone. I believe that too. Caleb looked at him sharply. Luis did not apologize. You want me to lie? No. Then let's tell the truth all the way. You hurt people, and you were hurt. You made choices, and some choices grew out of wounds you never treated. Both can be true. One does not erase the other. Caleb looked up at the thin stars. I don't know who I am without the guilt. Luis answered quietly, maybe that's what God wants to show you. The words stayed with him. The next morning, Caleb stayed. The morning after that, he read Emily's letter. He had waited 5 days because he was afraid. Finally, after breakfast, he took it outside to a bench near a leafless tree and unfolded it. Her handwriting was neat, with a few crossed-out words. Dad, I don't know what to call you right now. Dad feels normal and strange at the same time. I'm glad you answered the phone. I'm angry that answering the phone felt like a miracle. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if you'll finish treatment. I don't know if I'll ever stop being scared when someone says your name. But when you came to church, I saw that you were broken. I also saw that you came anyway. I'm writing this because I need you to know something. I did not stop loving you. I tried. I really tried. I thought hate would hurt less, but it didn't. Please don't use that against me. Please don't make me regret saying it. Get better because God still sees you. Get better because I still need a father, even if I don't know how to trust one yet. Caleb read it once, then again. Then he bent over the paper and cried so hard he could not breathe. A man named Raymond, a retired Marine in the program, sat beside him without asking questions. After a long while, Raymond said, Good letter? Caleb nodded, unable to speak. Hard letter? Caleb nodded again. Raymond leaned back. Those are usually the ones that save us. Weeks became months. Healing did not arrive like lightning. It came like dawn, slow enough that Caleb sometimes did not notice the sky changing. He learned what his triggers were. He learned to name panic before it became rage. He learned to call someone before cravings turned into a plan. He learned that prayer could be silence, that faith could be showing up to counseling. That repentance meant more than feeling sorry in the dark. He began writing letters, one to Hannah with no request inside it, one to Emily, answering her honestly, one to Marcus's widow, which took him 3 weeks to finish, and another 2 to mail, and one to his mother, though she was long buried in Kentucky. He wrote it anyway, because grief sometimes needs a place to go. Ruth visited twice, bringing cookies and church gossip that made him laugh. Emily came once a month at first, always with Hannah waiting in the parking lot. Their visits were awkward and tender. They played card games. They walked the grounds. Sometimes they talked about safe things, like school and music. Sometimes Emily asked hard questions. Did you ever choose alcohol over me? Caleb closed his eyes, then opened them. Yes, she stared at him. I hate that answer, he said, but yes. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you for not lying. Another time she asked, were you scared of me? That surprised him. Of disappointing you, he said, of seeing what I'd done in your face. She looked away. I was scared of you too. I know. No, you don't. Not because you hit me. You didn't. But because I never knew which version of you was coming home. Sad dad, angry dad, sorry dad, gone dad. Caleb sat with that, refusing to defend himself. I'm sorry, he said. I know. This time she did not say it coldly. It was not forgiveness yet, but it was something growing roots. T-Bone survived. By late spring, Terrell Baker was in a transitional housing program connected with Grace Harbor. Ruth made sure he had clean socks, a phone, and more casseroles than one man could eat. He complained about all of it and accepted every bit. Caleb helped him search for Isaiah. It took help from a church administrator, an old public record, and eventually a message sent through a cousin on social media. Terrell nearly threw the phone into a wall after sending it. 3 days later, Isaiah replied, "I got your message. I don't know what I want to say yet." But I read the letter. Terrell called Caleb and cried without speaking for 2 full minutes. "That's not nothing," Caleb told him. Terrell laughed through tears. "Barely counts. Barely counts." In June, Caleb completed the residential phase of treatment. He moved into veteran transitional housing and got part-time work with a church maintenance crew. The first paycheck was small, but he stared at it like a diploma. He opened a savings account. He bought new boots. He kept attending recovery meetings even when he did not feel like it. Especially when he did not feel like it. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the cold night outside the church, Caleb stood in the Grace Harbor Fellowship Hall holding a ladder while Emily painted a wall pale blue for the youth room. "You're dripping," he said. "I am not." A drop of blue paint landed on the tarp. He looked at it. She looked at it. "Don't say anything," she warned. "I wouldn't dare." She pointed the roller at him. "You have the face." "What face?" "The dad face." He froze. "Dad face." The words had come out before she realized it. Emily lowered the roller. Caleb looked down, giving her room to take it back. She did not. Instead, she said, "Can you hand me more tape?" He handed it to her. His eyes burned, but he smiled. Across the room, Ruth caught his eye and pretended not to cry. That summer, Emily invited him to her choir concert. This time, Caleb sat in the second row, not the back. Hannah sat 2 seats away. There was still distance between them, but not the frozen kind. During intermission, she asked about his job. He asked about her mother. They spoke politely, carefully, like people walking through a house after a fire, grateful to find anything still standing. After the concert, Emily came out laughing with friends. When she saw Caleb, she slowed. He held a small bouquet of daisies, her favorite when she was little. "You remembered," she said. "I remember more than I knew what to do with." She took the flowers. Then she hugged him in front of everyone. Not quickly this time. Caleb closed his eyes and thanked God without words. In September, on a Sunday morning, bright with early autumn light, Grace Harbor held a testimony service. Caleb had avoided signing up. Public speaking made his stomach twist. Public honesty felt worse. But the night before, he barely slept. He kept thinking about the church steps, the cold, the broken latch, the biscuit, the open door. He kept thinking about other men still outside. At 10:58, he wrote his name on the list. When Pastor Mark called him forward, Caleb walked to the microphone in a clean shirt and new boots. His beard was trimmed. His hands still shook a little, but he no longer tried to hide that. Emily sat beside Hannah in the third row. Ruth sat on the aisle. Terrell sat near the back with a cane across his knees, nodding like a proud uncle. Beside him sat a young man Caleb had never met before, but recognized instantly from the way Terrell kept glancing at him. Isaiah. They were not hugging. They were not healed all at once, but they were sitting in the same pew, barely counted, and barely was beautiful. Caleb gripped the microphone. "My name is Caleb Walker," he began. "I'm a veteran, I'm a father, I'm in recovery. And the first time I came to this church, I didn't come through the front door. I slept outside it." The room went quiet. He looked at the faces before him, some familiar, some new. "I used to think faith was for people who knew how to be strong. People who had clean clothes, steady hands, good answers. I thought church was a place you came after you fixed yourself." He glanced at Ruth. "Then one morning, a woman found me freezing under those steps and told me the heater didn't care whether I believed in church." Soft laughter moved through the room. Caleb smiled, then grew serious. "I was angry at God for a long time. Some of that anger came from pain, some came from guilt. I lost a friend overseas. I came home alive, but not whole. I hurt my family. I drank until I could not recognize myself, and I mistook shame for truth." His eyes moved to Emily. "There are people in this room who taught me that grace is not God pretending the wreckage doesn't exist. Grace is God meeting you in the wreckage and telling you the story does not have to end there." Emily wiped her cheek. Caleb's voice thickened. My daughter invited me here when I did not deserve an invitation. My friend Terrell carried my backpack back to this church when he could barely carry himself. Ruth opened a door. Counselors helped me face what I buried. This congregation fed me before it knew my name. He paused. And Jesus met me in all of it. Not as an idea, not as a lecture, as mercy, as truth, as the strength to take the next right step when I did not trust myself to take 10. He looked toward the back doors. I don't know who needs to hear this. Maybe someone is sitting in the back today because it feels safer near the exit. Maybe someone is outside, not sure if they're allowed in. Maybe someone loves a person who keeps breaking their heart, and you're tired. I can't promise a painless road. I can't promise every relationship will be restored exactly how you imagined. He looked back at Emily. But I can tell you this. No one is too far gone for God to find. And sometimes he starts with a cup of coffee, an old shoe, a hospital prayer, a daughter's letter, or a door that somebody forgot to lock. Ruth covered her mouth. Terrell whispered, "Amen." Caleb took a breath. I slept outside this church because I thought I had no home. But God was already moving people into place before I knew to ask. He had not forgotten where I was. I was the one who forgot he still came looking. For a moment, Caleb could not speak. Then he said, "Thank you for opening the door." He stepped back from the microphone. The room stood, not with wild applause, but with something deeper, a standing witness. People rose with tears in their eyes, not because Caleb's story was neat, but because it was true. After the service, Emily found him near the side hallway. "You did good," she said. "Thanks. You almost made Mrs. Ruth flood the sanctuary." "I saw," Emily smiled, then her face grew serious. "I'm proud of you." Caleb had received medals, certificates, handshakes from officers, and polite thank yous from strangers at airports. Nothing had ever meant what those 4 words meant from his daughter. He looked away, trying to keep his composure. Emily stepped closer. "I still get scared sometimes." "I know. And I still get mad." "You're allowed." "And we're not magically okay." "No." She nodded, satisfied that he understood. Then she took his hand. "But we're here." Caleb looked down at their joined hands. "Yes," he whispered. "We're here." Outside, autumn sunlight warmed the stone steps where he had once curled beneath a torn army jacket and waited for morning. A small plaque had been placed near the side entrance, not with Caleb's name and not with any grand announcement. Ruth had insisted on it after the church started a weekly outreach breakfast for veterans and anyone without shelter. The plaque read, "All are welcome. The door is open." On cold mornings, Caleb arrived early to help make coffee. Sometimes he saw men sitting near the steps with their shoulders hunched and their eyes full of suspicion. He never rushed them. He never preached first. He brought them a cup, maybe a biscuit, maybe a clean pair of socks. And when they said, "I don't do churches," Caleb would smile gently. "That's all right," he would answer. "The heater does." Years later, Emily would remember that season not as the year everything became easy, but as the year her father began coming home one honest step at a time. Caleb would remember it as the year God answered a bitter prayer behind a dumpster, not with lightning, but with people. Ruth, Terrell, Emily, a broken latch, a returned backpack, a hymn interrupted by mercy, and a savior patient enough to wait outside with him in the cold. Because Grace had found Caleb Walker on the church steps before he ever found the courage to walk inside. And once Grace found him, it did not let go.